This audio program is presented by Audible.com. Audible, audio that speaks to you wherever you are.
Tricks of the mind? Magic. A coin trick. Go and get a coin. Go on, run along, pause this, then come back. Now you've got a coin, good, place it on the table, about 4 inches or so from the edge nearest you. Now using your right hand, if you are right-handed, pick it up, but rather than trying to lift it straight from the surface of the table, slide it naturally back towards you with your fingertips, and let your thumb contact the underside as it reaches the table edge. Now as you pick it up, make your hand into a fist around the coin, bring your arm up, and hold it there. Got it? Do it a few times and note the feeling of the movement. Be relaxed and natural. Good. Now, this time, as the coin reaches the edge of the table, pretend to pick it up, using exactly the same series of movements, but let it fall into your lap instead. Your thumb doesn't really contact it, and the continuing movement of the fingers just push it off the table. Then, as before, make a fist as if the coin was still there, and bring your hand up. Blow on your hand, and open it. The imaginary fool sat opposite you is delighted. The coin has vanished. He believes you have special powers. You can rest. Now, be good enough to do this a few times until that moment of letting the coin drop is as relaxed and natural as picking it up normally. Alternate between really picking it up and only pretending to until the two sequences look and feel the same. If you can try it in front of a mirror, you will be amply rewarded, especially if you are as impishly beautiful, Penge Herald, as I am. This is an elementary coin sleight, but it is barely magic. Let us take this now comfortable sequence and make it more effective. In doing so, there's much to be learned about what makes magic magical. Firstly, why put a coin down in order to pick it straight back up again? Who other than a seriously retarded individual would enact such an absurdity? Such odd behaviour does rather detract from a convincing moment of magic. If you remove a coin from your pocket, place it on the table near you, then immediately pick it up to show that it's gone, then clearly the action of putting it down and picking it up was somehow special and necessary, and its very unnaturalness suggests to the spectator that some daring do must have occurred. Compare this, say, with the situation where the coin was there already. If you're just picking up a coin that happened to be in place on the table, then that immediately becomes much better. So perhaps you might hunt for something in your pocket a little earlier, removing a coin or two to facilitate the search. They get left on the table, forgotten and unimportant, one of them in the correct position for the trick. Now, you have to pick it up to do anything with it, so we start off with a much more natural set of circumstances. Good. Now there is another issue to be solved. The coin is there on the table, you apparently pick it up and make a fist, you open the fist and it's gone. Because the chain of events is so short and easy to reconstruct, it's more than possible that an astute observer, and many magicians underestimate how astute people are, could work out the trick. If it has gone from your fist, then perhaps it was never in your fist, so you can't have picked it up, must have gone somewhere else, aha, somehow slid off the table. And if they dive over the table to search your lap area for concealed currency, you're in a right pickle, and must resort to violence to keep them from lifting the dark veil of your art. So we have to upset the chain of events so they can't reconstruct so easily. So this time, instead of making a fist around the imaginary coin, fake putting it in your other hand, after you've supposedly picked it up, i.e. your left, but feel free to reverse all of this if you're left-handed, and then closing that fist around it. Do it with the real coin a few times to see how you perform this motion normally, then do exactly the same thing sans the coin. And if you listen through this a few times, pausing as you need to, I fully imagine that the use of the word sans will become both unnecessary and irritating. By the silly act of pretending to put a coin that isn't there into your left hand and curling your fist around it, you've now made it much more difficult for the observer to reconstruct events. Blow on the empty left fist and show that the coin has vanished. If they think that the coin was never really in the left fist, a decision they will have to arrive at once they've been roused with smelling salts and violent slapping, then the only explanation is that you must have retained it in your right fist. But they can see that the right fist is empty too. They'll be too busy pondering this conundrum to work their way back to whether or not you even picked it up. Good, but still not great. How great would it be if they were convinced they saw the coin in your right hand before you put it in your left? then there really would be no solution for them. So this time, before you pass the coin, in inverted commas, across to your left hand, mime showing it at your fingertips of your right hand. Hold it up for a moment as if you're fairly displaying it between your thumb and first two fingers. Now, anyone studying those fingers will see that there's nothing there, but if you make a quick and casual gesture, a swing of the hand up in the air as you say, watch, and then back down again to pass the coin to your left hand, they will, once you are relaxed and you time it just right, swear that you showed them the coin in that hand. That is an extraordinary thing, and imagine the delight that comes from knowing that you got away with it. Now, when the right hand retreats after apparently passing its coin to the left hand, move your attention to the left hand, but don't show your right to be empty. Keep it well over the table, hold it in a loose fist, as if you could still be secretly retaining the imaginary coin in it. Now you're toying with them. You're going to create a false solution that you've palmed that coin away in the right hand. Blow on your left and show it empty. Hold your position for a second to register the climax of the trick, then innocently open both hands as you say, "It's bizarre, isn't it?" You've given them a moment to hang their only explanation on the surmise that you must still have that coin in your right hand, then you've removed that one possibility from them. Still not finished, though. Much of the experience of magic happens after the trick is over, when the spectator tries to reconstruct what has happened. This is why we've already made it difficult for him, but there's more we can do. We can plant the seeds of false memories, and at the same time cover any worries you might have about not performing the sleight correctly. Earlier I suggested that you take out a couple of coins and place them on the table. Let's say coin A is a little further towards the centre of the table, too far to do the sleight. Coin B, however, is nearer you and in position for the trick. Look at both coins, and hover your hand a little over both, as if you're deciding which one to use. This secures in the spectator's mind the image of two coins fairly on the table. Decide on coin A and pick it straight up off the table. Don't slide it back, just pick it up. All attention will be on you and the coin. Place it fairly into your left hand and make a fist around it. Squeeze it and toy with it a little. Open your left hand for a moment, look at the coin and close it again. You're having trouble, though your spectators have no idea what you're trying to achieve. Give up and drop the coin out of your hand onto the table away from coin B. Make a self-deprecating remark. Right, that didn't work, sorry. The spectator's attention will dissipate, and you should relax too. As you relax, and allow your body to slump back a little, which will cue them to relax with you, go into the trick by apparently picking up coin B. You're now performing the sleight when the spectators are paying the least attention. Their eyes may still be directed at you, but for the vital moment, they are off guard. As long as you can make them relax in this way, you'll get away with anything during this vital offbeat. Once coin B is apparently in the left hand, sit forward again and build up the tension. The trick is now so much more convincing. Moreover, you have, by unsuccessfully going through the trick once with coin A, given them some snapshots that will confuse them later in their reconstruction. They've seen a coin being picked up directly from the table. They've seen a coin clearly in your left fist. Later, they will confuse what they saw the first time with what they saw the second time. No one should remember that you picked up the second coin in a slightly different manner. There is still more. How are you apparently making the coin vanish? For all these precautions and convinces we've woven into your little performance, is there not something rather cheap and amateurish about blowing on your hand and then immediately showing it empty? It's here that you actually create the magic. The magic happens not from what you do, but from what the spectator perceives. And it has its home not in the fact that the coin vanishes, that's the result of the magic, but how it vanished, that would be the magic part. So how about this? When the coin is apparently in your left hand, toy with it a bit, move it around. Now that's not something any sane person would do unless there really were a coin there, so it really cements the illusion. Act as if you have to get it into some special place in your hand in order to make it disappear. Needless to say, you don't verbalize this, you just act as if. Now concentrate, because making a coin disappear isn't easy. Perhaps it even hurts a bit. This small touch is a dramatic and rather powerful idea suggested by the always brilliant Teller of Penn and Teller. Maybe, and another great modern magician, Tommy Wonder, emphasizes the importance of this sort of silent script for magic, maybe your hand isn't quite warm enough, and that's making it more difficult. Maybe the fact you've just eaten makes it very hard to make it fully disappear. There's probably no need to blow on your hand now, or if there is, it's just for show. But not yet. Wait. hang on, there it goes, I can feel it. And then when it does go, does it pop? Does it get very hot? Does it disappear or somehow melt into the hand? Would it be interesting to vanish the coin and then ask the spectators if they can still see it? As if they might have only hallucinated its disappearance. How many different ways could you play with this to see what gets the best reaction? Any tension you feel the first few times you do it will be relieved by two things. Firstly, your muscles will learn how to perform the series of moves as fluidly as possible with a minimum of effort. And secondly, the reactions you will get, so out of proportion to the act of slipping a coin off a table, will delight you so much that in no time you'll be showing everyone. And to tell them how it was done, pathetically I just slipped the coin off the table, would be to take away their amazement and replace it with disappointment. Try that once, you'll see they switch from thinking it was a great piece of magic to, at best, an average trick. A card trick. Whilst out, getting hopelessly soused, smashed, sloshed, sottish, Scottish, sow-drunk, or sizzled during one of your regular Saturnalian Saturday nights, bring out your packet of pasteboards and offer the following piece of whimsy to your well-oiled companions. The trick is perhaps not really magic. Indeed, it falls into a slightly unpleasant area of conjuring known as the sucker trick, which delights in exposing the spectator as a fool. Still, it should earn you a few free drinks. Pick upon the dunce or besom head you wish to victimize, have him shuffle the cards. It's worth making sure you do not pick a skilled card shuffler or closet croupier. If he performs anything other than a basic overhand shuffle, avoid anyone who riffles the two halves of the deck together. Have him pass the deck to someone else for further shuffling, in inverted commas. Unless you happen to have caught either Dame Fortune or her unusual sister Mistress Providence during moody lady time, you should find that this one move brings forward a suitably unimpressive shuffler. Take the deck back from this unsuspecting clodpate and turn it face up in your hand. This means, in case the esoteric idiom of the thaumaturge eludes you, that you make sure you're looking down at an actual card face on the top rather than the back of a card. However, the very nanosecond that you've seen this card, turn away and spread them a little in your hands to show the assembled half-wits and harlequins the faces of the deck. They're all different, obviously, and well mixed now, you can say, to justify this sequence, which has afforded you a glimpse of that first card. Turn the deck face down before turning back around and neatly place it squared up on the table. You've given the impression that you've not seen any of the cards, and while this is not terribly important at this point, it will help you to create the surprise later. Do remember the bottom card you glimpsed. This is your key card, and your ability to recall that card later will make all the difference between you seeming as much like a turnip or twerp as your friends, or looking literally as clever as Jesus. Now, tell the gullible mooncalf or Merry Andrew sat in front of you to cut the deck into two whilst you look away. Mime the action of removing a pile of cards from the top of the deck and placing it to your right of the remainder. You do want him to place his cut-off top half to your right, but in case he places it to the left, make a note of the position of the deck on the table so that when you do turn back in a few moments, you'll be able to tell which half is which, in case of any confusion. Turn away and let the lean-witted Punchinello do exactly as you so patiently told him. Tell him to remove the card that he cut to, i.e. the top card of the bottom half, and have a good look at it. As he does so, turn back round and casually pick up the original bottom half of the deck, from which you would have just taken his card. This should be the pack of cards to your left. Normally, if you don't turn completely away, you can tell peripherally that he's placed it down correctly. Either way, do ensure you are picking up the bottom half. The card on the underside or face of this half is of course the card that you've remembered, but you'd be a fool to have to double-check. Hold this half above the other half, the original top half that he cut off, and tell him to replace the card. Without telling him to do so, you can make it clear that he is to place the card back between the two halves. It will seem a very natural thing to do, as he's just removed it from the middle of the deck and now appears to be putting it back again in the same place. In fact, rather excitingly, his card is now next to the key card. It is this secret fact that is soon to win you victory over the dumb-clucks and dunderheads and secure the intimate favours of any creature upon this earth. Now, although it is vital that these two cards stay together, you are now very bravely going to ask the Tom Noddy to shuffle the cards. What's that? Won't that undo all our clever machinations? Have I separated myself from my senses? How could such a thing work? Am I simply mad? Perhaps at this point you're reaching for the stop button in blood-red boiling anger, incontinent with rage at the wasted effort you've put into learning this so far, already dialing the ladies and gentlemen at both the 4th Channel and the Daily Mail to insist that this audio is banned from sale and simply never aired on Radio 1. I merely say, bear with me. Cease all activities that are not entirely tantamount to bearing with me, and let me explain. It is for this reason alone, if you will just simmer down for a second, that you've chosen a poor shuffler. As long as he once more gives the deck a simple overhand shuffle, you can rest assured that the two important cards, your glimpsed keycard and his selection, will remain as a pair. You can subtly hurry him along and stop him from shuffling too thoroughly by extending your hand after a few moments and saying casually, "Great, just so we don't know where the card is." Also, by asking him to mix them a bit rather than shuffle, this very often helps too. Take the deck back when he's done and say that you're going to deal the cards face up onto the table, and he is to try not to react if he sees his card. Hold the deck face down and start to deal cards from the top, turning them over one at a time. Make a rough pile on the table as you do so. You are, and I'm sure I don't need to tell you, watching out for your key card. The moment you deal that key card, the next card will be the very card that Charlie sat before you is thinking of. However, bat not an eyelid and keep dealing past the chosen card, making sure that you continue to make such a rough pile on the table that the index of the actual chosen card remains visible to you. Our imprudent friend will, of course, be gloating with that quite specific smugness of one who believes his card has been mistakenly dealt past. Stop whenever you feel the moment is right, and proudly state the following. I bet you a pint/glass of wine/warm water with a slice of lemon/£1,000,000 that the next card I turn over will be your card. Look like you are poised to turn over the next card from the deck. Have the cockle-brained halfwit agree to the deal, then reach forward, remove the chosen card from the pile, and turn it over. Climb on the table and roar for applause before triumphantly urinating on the group. Now, there are a couple of afterthoughts regarding this trick which might be of use to you, crumbs from the table of a showbiz pro. Firstly, when you take the deck back after shuffling, just before you start dealing, take a look at the bottom, brackets face, card of the deck. This can easily be done by tapping the deck on the table to square it, and just glimpsing the bottom card. It's conceivable, though very unlikely, that this card is your key card. If indeed you do recognise it to be so, it means that the actual chosen card is on top of the deck, the very first card you would deal. Now, if this happens, you can remedy the situation by having someone cut the deck before dealing. This will allow you to proceed with the trick as explained above, and it will bring the two cards back together in the middle of the deck. Alternatively, it does allow you to segue into a much more impressive trick instead. If you see that key card on the bottom, I would suggest placing the deck face down on the table, talking some nonsense about how when we choose a card we develop a kind of relationship with it, and that in something as random as a shuffle it's possible for us to express that affinity by unconsciously controlling it. And if you feel like really lying, you could tell them that in a series of tests it's been shown that particularly intuitive people will actually shuffle a card they're thinking of to the top of the deck without realizing it. Have them accept the seeming unlikelihood of such a statement, then sit back and let them take as long as they want to reach forward and turn over the top card for themselves. Secondly, dealing the cards to random positions on the table, rather than into a pile, offers you other opportunities to make this even more dangerously impressive. Let's imagine that you deal past the key card and you see that the selection is a 4 of hearts. Now, unless you're unfortunate enough for this selection to reveal itself near the very end of the deck, you can now join up the scattered cards into the shape of a 4 and an H, the 4 of hearts, as you deal, and continue dealing. If you don't feel you have enough cards left to do this convincingly, it doesn't matter, the scattered dealing will just seem like a mysterious part of the secret. But if you do manage to casually deal the cards into a giant representation of the selection, the 4 of hearts, then you have what we like to call a kicker ending. After turning over the correct card, the 4 of hearts, you can point out the arrangement on the table, a giant 4 and an H, which somehow gives the impression that you must have known the card from the very start. Perception is everything. The fascinating, frustrating and wonderful thing about magic is that none of the years of practice you might put into it mean anything of themselves. For many years I took great pleasure in coming up with card tricks, many of which relied on fairly complicated sleights. I'm rather out of practice now and have lost some interest too, but for a long time it was something of a passion. The magic community is bursting with hobbyist performers who spend long hours perfecting complicated flourishes and sleights, which is not in itself an ignoble path to follow, but such obsession has very little connection with the magician's ability to create the experience of magic in an entertaining way. If one wished to be a comedian, one would need to start performing on stage to give oneself that title. There are plenty of people who like telling jokes after dinner, but none other than the most arrogantly self-appraising would call himself a comic. With magic, the very role is pretense, and any child who can search endlessly for your card in a special deck from a toy shop can call himself a magician. One's own level of technical expertise may separate the professional from the hobbyist, but it's not the stuff from which magic is made. This is because magic isn't about fakes and switches and dropping coins on your lap. It's about entering into a relationship with a person whereby you can lead him economically and deftly to experience an event as magical. That experience has something to do with a rather childlike feeling of astonishment, but it also contains an adult intellectual conundrum. It exists only in the head of the spectator, and though your skills may have led him there, it is not the same as those skills. It inhabits an experience the spectator has. It's not to be found in the method the magician employs. Hence, the overriding importance of presentation. One famous and wonderful magician, Eugene Berger, a giant amongst close-up conjurers, has said that he could spend the rest of his life just learning how to perform 3 or 4 tricks. For example, it's an interesting maxim in conjuring that most of the magic happens after the trick is over. Returning to our coin trick, we planted images in their minds designed to confuse their later reconstruction of what happened. Didn't I see the coin in his hand before it vanished? I'm sure he picked it up straight off the table. I saw it. But there is more to it, and the psychology is interesting. When our imaginary spectator is amazed at a trick, he has been charmingly fooled into experiencing something impossible. He has an emotional reaction of astonishment that is greater and more overwhelming than the knowledge in the back of his mind that he must have been fooled. Indeed, so contagious is his own amazement that the knowledge that he's been fooled is neither here nor there. If anything, he'll feel admiration for the person who fooled him for doing so brilliantly. Amazement, like bewilderment, is a state that brings with it a heightened suggestibility. So immediately, the baffled spectator will absorb any suggestions given him by the magician, all of which will be designed to make the feat seem even more impossible. The fooled spectator will do everything he can to enhance how wonderful the trick was. This is worthy of note. Rarely is there any sense of challenge, anger, or resentment at being tricked, although there will always be irritating magicians who will court that reaction, and spectators with issues regarding control who will always respond in that way. Some form of unspoken contract exists between the performer and the spectator which permits the deception. However, the spectator has been fooled, which means that he is in something of a dilemma after the event. If the trigger's hit home, he'll want to talk about it with friends in the same way one instinctively wants to share anything amazing by enthusiastically telling anyone who'll listen. As we know, in an attempt to infect the other person with our excitement regarding an event, we tend to give a less than balanced account of what happened. We focus on all the factors that contributed to our amazement, ignore those that might detract from the wonder we wish to convey, and generally try to paint a vivid and colourful story, albeit one prone to exaggeration. However, balanced with this desire to communicate his enthusiasm and inspire it in others, the spectator's also aware that the person to whom he's describing the trick might be laughing a little at him for being duped, and anyone who's tried to convince someone to join a pyramid scheme will know that feeling. So in order not to be seen as an easy target, the person describing the trick will often exaggerate the factors that made it impossible. For example, he'll insist that the magician never touched the deck of cards, that he himself thoroughly shuffled them, or that he definitely saw the coin in the magician's hand moments before it disappeared. Interestingly, it's not the case that the spectator is merely making these things up to impress other people. He'll normally believe them himself. Proof of this is that if asked by the magician immediately after the trick to recap exactly what happened, he'll normally supply similar exaggerations and denials and insistences that he'll report to a friend. Although, of course, time is the friend of this developing hyperbole and selective amnesia. If you understand this very reliable law, it's easy to plant all sorts of seeds within the performance of a trick, or in the moment following the climax when the spectator is at his most suggestible, to ensure that the magic trick ties itself up neatly after the event to form the memory of something that is genuinely impossible. Realizing this, and utilizing the principle, allows enormous fun to be had. For example, in a card trick I used to perform, it was important that the deck was in a special order at the start. However, later on, it was safe for the spectator to shuffle them. Now, at this point, I would give him the deck for the first time and say, "Shuffle the deck again, but this time do it under the table." Now, immediately, he's concerned about the slightly awkward process of shuffling them blindly without dropping any, and he hasn't questioned that little word "again," as in shuffle the deck again, which was slipped in. It can be helped along with the words, "It's not as easy, is it?" while he shuffles, and you see he's unwittingly accepting the suggestion that he's shuffled them before. And that makes it very easy for him to misremember what happened, and if he then relates the trick as having begun with him shuffling the deck, he'll confirm that to himself and develop a lovely false memory, and the trick becomes impossible ever to work out. There are many more psychological principles one must instinctively absorb to perform this sort of close-up magic as beautifully and deftly as possible. I'm less interested in stage magic illusions, as while it's more demanding to pull off a top-class performance on stage, the interpersonal element seems to be fixed and prescribed, and in this sense it's less interesting than the close-up situation. One principle really hit home while I was performing at a restaurant table in Bristol many years ago. I'd been working on a long and involved card trick where 3 chosen cards would disappear from the deck and turn up in obscure places such as my shoes and inside the card box, and go through a series of vanishes and changes and appearances in this way. I thought it would be a great climax to have each of the 3 cards appear under each spectator's drink, and I spent many hours at home in front of a mirror working out a clever sleight to get the 3 cards palmed and fed under the glasses at suitable moments. Normally one can get away with this sort of thing once, but 3 times seemed a rather tough call. Now, there is a law in physics, I trust you remember, which states that for every action there is an equal and opposite reaction. For example, if I were to repeatedly punch Robert Kilroy's silk full in the face, or push a rolled-up copy of the Daily Mail very far into his bottom, he would react by begging for mercy and probably crying. His reaction would be in direct proportion to how much I was hurting him, or something. Equally, it can apply to the psychological grammar of magic. If you're watching a half-decent magician perform a trick for you, you're probably watching very carefully to catch him out. You'll watch his every move, like the proverbial hawk, determined not to miss anything. By doing so, you are unwittingly playing into exactly those hands that you're studying so intently. This is because for every unit of concentration, there must follow an equal and opposite unit of relaxation. Remember the business with your new coin trick when you tried it first with coin A and then failed? The more they watch you, the more they will then relax and stop paying attention when they think the trick is over. When you fail to make the first coin disappear, the spectators relax, and then you perform the sleight. Conjurers understand this principle, and during my years as a conjurer, the act of performing a trick like this became rather like a game. Firstly, you invite the concentration, then supply a sense of closure or climax or failure. Next, perform the sleight of hand or moment of trickery as both you and the spectator relax. The spectator will never suspect he's being manipulated in this way, and even if he does, there's very little he can do about it. One of the mistakes a novice magician makes is to tense up and lean forward when he performs a sleight. The more experienced performer knows the value of relaxing across a reliable offbeat to render his moves invisible. For this reason, very often the more attentive a spectator is, the easier he is to fool. Scientists have many times been fooled in the laboratory by charlatans posing as psychics for the same reason. The more you watch, the more you'll miss. It was this principle that provided an unexpected answer in the restaurant that night. I reached what would normally have been the end of this card trick, which involved producing the 3 cards from inside the card box after they'd seemingly disappeared from my hands, and I found them and I tossed them down on the table. Both my verbal and my non-verbal language signified a clear end to the trick. They, the spectators, reacted very nicely by physically moving back and applauding. Their crescendo of concentration had peaked moments before. The cards have gone again, but I was watching. Where could they be? Must try and catch him out. And then with the final production, they were happy to be overwhelmed and to give up. And in their enthusiastic reaction, they became inattentive to my actions on the table. It takes effort to concentrate, and there's only so much you can apply before you want to stop and relax. And at this point, I took the 3 cards and, smiling and thanking them for their attention, reached across and pushed one under each of their drinks. Not a furtive move, just relaxed, casual, and unhurried. As I did this, I also let 3 other cards drop face down on the table from the balance of the deck to replace the 3 chosen cards that had been there before. Because these were face down, the group would presume that these were still their cards. Not one of the party seemed to notice my actions or the exchange. I returned to a relaxed, sat back in the chair posture myself, and then said something along the lines of, "One more time, watch," and I sat forward, picked up one of the 3 face-down random cards, placed it into the deck. I picked up one of the remaining 2, then swapped it for the 3rd one and placed that in the deck. I was keeping them focused on these cards again, and the meaningless switch of the 2nd for the 3rd card helped convince them that I was using the same 3 chosen cards. Why would I worry about the order in which I was returning them if they weren't the same 3? I replaced the final card, squared up the deck, and held it in a slightly unnatural position to raise their suspicion, and invited them to watch me closely. I may have even have shuffled awkwardly to maintain their focus on this deck. Then I turned it face up. I spread it across the table, being careful not to go near their drinks. I pointed out that their cards had gone. They looked for them in the spread, and in doing so again their attention was still directed to a limited area of the table and away from their glasses. I sat right back to put as much distance between me and them as possible, and then asked them to look right at me. I said to them calmly and clearly, "Each of your cards is now right in front of you, under each of your drinks." And it was nice to watch their faces for a moment as they processed that information before looking. Years of practicing sleight of hand and secret moves that might have allowed me to secretly slip a card under a glass without being noticed had gone out of the window. I had just put them there, quite openly, right in front of them. I'd made no attempt to hide my actions. You start to live for moments like that. Much, if not all, of conjuring relies on the performer creating a false trail of events that clearly leads to a particular climax. Very little is hidden. Most sleights and secret, in inverted commas, moves happen right out in the open, but the spectator pays no attention to them. It seems that the magician creates a very strong sense of A leads to B, leads to C, leads to D, where A is the start of the trick and D is the impossible climax. All of these stages are punctuated clearly, and there should be no confusion along the way. In fact, it's one of the rules of great magic, according to Derren, the father of modern close-up conjuring, that tricks should be very simple in plot. One of my considerations when putting my own performances together is making sure that you, the witty and sexually attractive viewer, can recap to your inattentive friends who perhaps due to illness did not watch my show exactly what I did in a few simple words. While it's tempting to pile on extra coincidences or outcomes along the way, much is lost if the whole thing doesn't feel simple and direct. So A, B, C, and D should be plotted along a simple, direct line. In a magic trick, A, he asked me to shuffle the deck, is followed by B, I took a card out and put it back in the deck, which leads straight to C, he then made the deck disappear, and D, I then found my card in my own pocket. A miracle! Missed along the way, though, are the seemingly insignificant moments that fall between A, B, C, and D, the moving of the spectator into position at the start, as perhaps a card is loaded into his pocket, the quick check of the deck made by the magician after it was shuffled, allowing him to secure the duplicate card in the deck, which he then had to force on the spectator, and the magician's first failed attempt to find the card, or even his wrapping of the deck in a handkerchief before vanishing the deck, which enabled him to spirit the pack away into his pocket or some other receptacle. These details seem irrelevant to the main thrust of the story, and may easily be forgotten as the story of the trick is told. For all these reasons, it is generally the most uninterested spectator who's hardest to fool. When I performed this kind of magic for groups at parties, it was the peripheral punters stood on the sidelines with folded arms, half in conversation with each other, who were the danger. If they were not paying attention, I could not bring them into the game. They watched less, but they saw more. To pursue an interest in conjuring magic is to open the doors to obsession. Now, I came into it at a relatively late age, but generally one begins early, most probably as an unconfident child. Few kids seek to learn a skill specifically designed to impress people unless they feel less than impressive themselves. And as things develop, there are magic shops and magic clubs, lectures, books and props, and the potential of meeting unusual, even hypnotically grotesque characters. The protégé delights in learning new sleights and eventually spends so much money on his new hobby that he's tempted to try and earn a little something with it. Unfortunately, he'll have been exposed to predominantly appalling magic and will have learned only to ape the mannerisms and performance styles of his mentors. Many people I know have had the strange experience of chatting to a perfectly pleasant young man who turns out to be a magician, and curious to see what he can do, they accept his offer to show them something, and are surprised to see him as if someone had pressed play, transform into a quite unlikable caricature, changing his speech pattern, making rude comments about what they're wearing, cracking weak, unpleasant and soulless gags and utterly disengaging them from the situation. Sadly, the ability to perform magic naturally and with any charm is perhaps the most difficult thing to learn. It is, however, an obsession that can connect one with an underworld of seedy, smelly old men, crooked gambling, and highly guarded secret skills. I think these are good things. Relentless egos, terrible outfits, and terrific bitchiness make for a diverse, colourful, and sometimes frustrating fraternity. The intrigued listener is advised to contact his local magic shop, order a dozen decks of cards, and get started.
This audio program is presented by Audible.com. Audible, audio that speaks to you wherever